Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about which method we need to use for factoring. Right now, we have two different types of polynomials. We have binomials. These have two terms. And we have trinomials. They have three terms. Now the binomials could possibly look like ax squared plus bx, or ax squared plus c, or bx plus c. When you have, so the first thing we should always do, no matter what the problem looks like, whether it's a binomial or trinomial, the first thing you should always do is look for a GCF. Look for a greatest common factor. And if you can divide that out, if you can divide that GCF out, you want to do that. Even if it's a trinomial, it makes all the numbers smaller, and then the factoring, the rest of the trinomial becomes easier. So always look for the greatest common factor first. You're going to see GCF becomes the only way to factor the binomials that look like ax squared plus bx. You can take out the x, you could take out the common factor, and then usually what's left that you can't factor anymore. Sometimes when it's ax squared plus c, you can take out the GCF, and then it might be a difference of squares. That's when you have a squared minus b squared. When you have that, remember that factors to a plus b times a minus b. So you look for the GCF first no matter what, and then if it's in the bx plus c form, it is also a GCF problem. So definitely binomials, the first thing you should look for is a GCF. If you can take that out, you do so. If you can't take that out, are you looking at a difference of squares? The first number has to be a perfect square and the second number has to be a perfect square. So for the trinomials, you're also going to find the GCF first. They look like x squared plus bx plus c. On these problems, we use our x. C goes on top and b goes on the bottom. And the numbers multiply to c and add to b. Or you might have it in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. When that is your problem, then we use the guess and check method. So for the first one, you are looking at a binomial. It's two terms, so the first thing I'm definitely going to do is look for a greatest common factor. I see 18 and 6. The greatest common factor there is 6. And then a z squared and a z, so they also have a z in common. So when I factor that out, I want to know 6z times what gives me 18z squared, and that's going to be 3z. And then 6z times what gives me 6z, and that's 1. So my factorization is 6z times the quantity of 3z plus 1. I'm doing the same thing for number 4. I have a binomial, two terms. They seem to have a common factor of 4, because 4 I can divide 32 by. So 4, and they both have a z. So 4z times z gives me the 4z squared, plus 4z times 8 gives me the 32z. Now when I look at number 3, I don't have any common factors. 10 and 24 have a common factor, but there's no common factor here because the coefficient is 1. So I surpassed that step. I've looked at it. There's no common factor. This looks like the x squared plus bx plus c, so that's my x problem, where I want to know what two numbers multiply to 24 and add to 10. And when I do that, I have 6 and 4. 6 times 4 is 24. 6 plus 4 is 10. So it's z plus 6 and z plus 4. Number 4 is a trinomial. There's no common factor between 1x squared, negative 9, and 4, not even a 2. So this is my x problem. I want to know what numbers multiply to 14 and add to -9. What are those two numbers? We have -7 and -2. They multiply to +14, they add to -9, so my factorization is x minus 7 times x minus 2. Now number 5 is a binomial, right? Again, this is a binomial. Number 4 was a trinomial, 3 terms. This binomial doesn't have any common factors, right? 1 and 25. Am I looking at perfect squares? 1 is a perfect square, it's 1 squared. 25 is a perfect square, it's 5 squared. So you're asking yourself, what two numbers multiply to -25 and add to 0? And that's -5 and +5. So it factors to m plus 5 times m minus 5. And remember, it doesn't matter which order you write the parentheses. You could write it m minus 5 first, m plus 5. Either one is the same, they're equal. Okay, but where the negative signs do matter. Number 16, again, is a binomial. I'm looking for a greatest common factor. M doesn't have a coefficient, so there isn't one. And again, I'm looking for two numbers that really, if I write that the other way, I'm looking for numbers that multiply to 16 and add to 0. And that's going to be 4 and -4. But 4 and -4 actually multiply to a positive or -16. So the 4 is going to go first. 4 minus m and 4 plus m are my factors. And when I do that, I get 16, I get -4m, I get +4m, these equals 0, and -m squared. Number 7, I need a common factor to factor out all 3 terms. I have a common factor here of 3, but that doesn't help me with the h squared. So I'm just going to treat this as a trinomial, an x squared trinomial. And I get what two numbers multiply, this is number 7, to 9 and add to 6. And we get 3 and 3, +3 and +3. So my factors for number 7 are h plus 3 times h plus 3. Number 8 is also a trinomial. I want to know, there's no common factor here, so I'm back to my x problem again. So number 8, what two numbers multiply to -36 and add to -5? We have -9 and +4. So my factors for number 8 are x minus 9, so number 8, and x plus 4. Now we have coefficients. Okay, coefficients on the x squared. These are ax squared plus bx plus c. So I'm first going to look for a common factor. There's no common factor for 8, 18, and 9. 18 and 9 have a common factor of 9. 8 and 18 have a common factor of 2, but that doesn't help me. So I don't have a greatest common factor, so I'm going to guess and check. 8x squared minus 18x plus 9. And I'm looking for the first two here are going to multiply to the 8x squared. So let's try 4x and 2x. Because 8 is 4 times 2 or 8 times 1. 9 is 3 times 3 or 9 times 1. So now these two numbers are going to multiply to the 9. So we get 3 and 3 possibly. And now we're going to check our outside and our inside. These need to add to -18x. And I'll deal with the negative sign in a minute. So I have 6x and 12x. If I need them to add to -18, they could both be negative. And that puts negatives on both of my 3's. So my final answer is 4x minus 3 times 2x minus 3. And I got lucky on the first try. I could have tried 8 and 1 and would have found that it doesn't work. Let's look at number 10. Again, I have a coefficient on the x squared, so I'm looking at the guess and check method. 10x squared, 31x, 15. They don't have a common factor between all three of them. So we're going to guess and check here. So 10 is 5 times 2 or 10 times 1. And 15 is 5 times 3. That's not good. 5 times 3 or 15 times 1. So we'll start with our parentheses here. I need my first 2 to multiply to the 10x squared. So I'm going to try 5x and 2x. And then my last 2 need to multiply to 15. So let's try 5 and 3. And then we're going to check our outside and our inside. Our outside times our inside need to add to 31. So I get 10x and 15x. That is 25. So that didn't work. So I'm going to try again. I'm going to maybe try my 3 here. Oops. My 3 here. And my 5 here. And how does that change this? Oh, it still needs to add to 31. This gives me 6x and 25x. Well, that equals positive 31, and I have a positive here. So these are both positive. So my answer for number 10 is 5x plus 3 times 2x plus 5. Okay, let's look at number 11. I'll put it over here. Oops. Number 11, 8x squared minus 22x plus 15. And I need a common factor here. There isn't one, so I'm going to look for that first, and if I don't, then I'm going to go to my guess and check method. So I've got 4 times 2 and 8 times 1, and I have 5 times 3 and 15 times 1. So let's try 8x and x. First, I need to make it 22. We'll go 5 and 3. Check my outside and my inside. They need to add to negative 22. So I get 8x times 3x is 24x, and 5 times x is 5x. So if I add these, I get 29, and I need negative 22. And if I subtract them, I get 19. So that doesn't work. So let's try them a different way. Let's try 5 and 3. Well, that gives me 40 and 3. That's not going to get me anywhere near 22. So that didn't work. Should we try 15 and 1? Something tells me that's going to be large. Well, if I do it that way, I get 8x and 15x, which is 23. That's really close. And if I put it the other way, it's definitely going to be too large. So that tells me I need to try a different combination. The 8x didn't work. So how about 4x and 2x? Now let's try 3 and 5. If I do it this way, my outside is 12x. My inside is 10x, sorry. Well, there we go. 10 times 12, or 10 plus 12. Adding these together, they need to equal negative 22, so they both need to be negative. So my answer is 4x minus 5, 2x minus 3. So I always like to deal with the negatives at the end. See if it's possible to get my middle term sum, and then figure out how to make the negatives make that work. Looking for, so number 12. Again, we're going to look to see, do I have any common factors? I don't. So we're going to say that 4x squared minus 23x plus 15, that's number 12. 4 is 2 times 2, or 4 times 1. 15 is 1 and 15, 5 and 3. I realized we've had a lot of 15s on this worksheet. And so let's start with 2x and 2x. And let's try 5 and 3. Our goal is to get 23. So we get our outside is 10x, our inside is 6x. That's not going to work. So let's change it, because if I move the 5 and 3, it ends up being the same. So let's try 4 and 1. 4 and 1. So my outside is 20x, and my inside is 3x. Will that give me a 23? Yes, it needs to be negative 23, so they both are negative. So my answer is 4x minus 3 times x minus 5. And number 13, looking again, common factors, I don't have any, so we're going to look at 3 times 1, 3n squared minus 7n. Hold on, let me move this away here. Number 13, 3n squared minus 7n minus 20. So that's 3 and 1. It's the only one we got that. 5 times 4, 2 times 10, or 20 times 1. Those are my options for 20. So we're going to look at 3n and n. And I need it to be 7, so the numbers should be pretty close together. How about 5 and 4? I like to try those first. My outside is 15n, and my inside is 4n. I need it to add to negative 7n, so there's no way I'm going to get 7 out of 15 and 4. So let's try swapping them. Put my 4, I forget what I had. Put my 4 here and my 5 here. So that's 3n times 4 gives us the 12n, and 5 times n is 5n. If I subtract 5n minus 12n, that gives me negative 7. So it's going to have to be the negative 4 and the positive 5. So it's 3n plus 5. Some of that times n minus 4. And then number 14, 6x cubed minus 12x squared minus 144 x. So I'm looking for common factors. I notice 6, 12, and 144. Well, 144 is 12 times 12, so that means I can divide it by 6, and then they all have some form of an x, so we can take out a 6x, and when we do that we get x squared minus 2x, and I believe 144 divided by 6 is 24, so minus 24. And then now I'm looking for two numbers that multiply, because now I'm at that polynomial, or the trinomial with no coefficient here. I have no coefficient, so I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 24 and add to negative 2. And that is going to be 6 and 4. And I need it to be negative 2, so negative 6 and positive 4. So my final factorization is 6x times x minus 6 times x plus 4.